Well, without further ado, I'll get started so we don't keep everybody all night. I know it's late in these different parts of the world. So, guys, my name is Dave Van Pelt. I'm a member of St. John's Lodge #1 in Mountain Lakes, New Jersey. I'm currently the senior warden. I'll be going into the East next year. I started doing these presentations kind of really just for fun. I really enjoyed putting them together and kind of learning about them myself. So I have presentations I do on a few different topics. My first one I created that really was like years of research was my Knights Templar one, and how it intertwined into Freemasonry. I have one on the Declaration of Independence, the events that led up to it. We do some orientations, and this John Paul Jones one is my latest and one of my favorites. It really, like, even sitting home just reading it myself, it kind of chokes me up a little, as weird as that might sound. But I really enjoyed doing this one. I personally think it's great. So, but I'm supposed to. I made it, So I hope everybody enjoys. And what I break it down into a few sections, chapters, as you want to call it. So they kind of have a few titles. The presentation's about 30, 35 minutes long, after which I just have a quick second slideshow with some cool things I'm going to point out and talk about real quick. That part will be fast. So once the presentation itself is done, again, another quick slideshow that'll last a couple minutes long, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A. So right now I am going to share my screen. And let me just make sure everybody can see my share. Oops, sorry, wrong button. Okay. Oops. Sorry, working out the kinks here. Okay, beautiful. All right, guys. So this actually presentation I created, I believe I kind of finalized it around January in 2021. So COVID, everybody's sitting home. This is what I did. So we'll start the beginning. John Paul Jones was America's greatest revolutionary naval commander and the founder of America's naval tradition. He was the first hero of the United States Navy. His life was one of mystery and intrigue. There are many serious gaps in the history of his life that can be attributed to his being a world traveler and a military and naval innovator. He was born simply John Paul at an estate named Arbogland in Kirkcudbright on the Scottish coast on July 6, 1747. His father was no nobleman. He was the gardener for the Arbogland estate, and the Paul family lived in a small but comfortable cottage. His mother, Jean, was the daughter of a small farmer. John Paul was the fourth of 7 children. He had a usual course of study at a village school in Kirkcudbright, and by the time he was 13, he was ready to go to sea and embark on his destiny. With the assistance of his relatives, he found an apprenticeship with a local ship owner. This was not an unusual choice for teenage boys growing up on the Scottish coast, and his parents gave their blessing. He immediately entered into the Atlantic trade that linked England, America, the West Indies, and Africa. John Paul's first voyages were aboard the merchant brig Friendship out of Whitehaven. The Friendship was not a large vessel. It measured perhaps 80 to 85 feet by 22 feet, but she was ocean-worthy, and her crew of 28 knew how to handle both her sails and her 18-deck guns, which she needed, for in those days, merchant vessels might be harassed by pirates or enemy nations. For 3 years, John Paul sailed the Friendship on her yearly voyage from Whitehaven to Barbados to Virginia. Her triangle trade, as they called it, sent out consumer goods to Barbados, where she picked up rum and sugar in its place. In Virginia, those were exchanged for tobacco, pig iron, and barrel wood. Fredericksburg, Virginia was home to John Paul's older brother, William. William worked as a tailor in the busy colonial port, living at the corner of what is now Caroline Street and Lafayette Boulevard. William had an unhappy marriage and left no children, but during his visits, his younger brother John became excited about the American colony's prospects. After the French and Indian War ended, Britain experienced a recession. Back in Whitehaven, the French ship was sold and her crew all let go. 16-year-old John Paul had 3 years worth of sailing skills, but was now without work, as were many seamen. Eventually, he accepted work as a third mate aboard the King George. The King George was a slaver, also known as a blackbirder, taking advantage of the still legal status on the importation of slaves. John Paul served on the King George for 2 years. He then took a post as first mate aboard another slaver called the Two Friends. But after just one voyage aboard the Two Friends, he resigned, never again serving as part of what he would later call that abominable trade. When his ship tour was paid in Jamaica, he was able to find a ride home to Britain with a friendly Scot, also from Kirkcudbright, aboard the brigantine John. After the captain and chief mate of the ship died of fever, John Paul brought the ship back to port safely. The owners were so appreciative that they gave John Paul command of a cargo ship at the age of 21. Sea captain. 21-year-old John Paul and 6 other crew members made 2 round-trip voyages to Jamaica in the John. With the John's owners' full recommendations, John Paul's next command came in 1772 when he took charge of the 3-masted brig, the Betsy of London. The Betsy made good money for Captain Paul, but she was a leaky vessel, and some of the crew became mutinous over a pay issue. While in Tobago, the ringleader, whom John Paul later described as a prodigious brute of thrice my strength, swung at him with a club. The small-sized Captain Paul ran him through with his sword. Since his assailant was a local of Tobago, John Paul's friends urged him to consider leaving the island quickly, not trusting the local authorities to give him a fair hearing. He did exactly that, adding the name Jones to John Paul. From here on out, he would be known as Captain John Paul Jones. Revolution is in the air. He arrived in America in 1774 at a time when the conflict with Britain over taxes and self-government was reaching a boiling point. Familiar from birth with Great Britain's harsh treatment of the Scottish people, Jones was immediately sympathetic to America's quest for liberty. In 1775, after the battles at Lexington and Concord, John Paul Jones traveled to Philadelphia and offered his services to the new Continental Navy. Having long been protected by the powerful British Navy, America began the Revolutionary War without naval power of any kind. Congress acted quickly to convert merchant ships to ships of war and to begin building new ships for the Navy. With his seagoing background and the support of a North Carolina congressman, Jones was quick to see service. Jones was appointed as a first lieutenant of the newly built converted 24-gun frigate USS Alfred in the Continental Navy on December 7, 1775. Jones sailed from the Delaware River in February 1776 aboard the Alfred on the Continental Navy's maiden cruise. It was aboard this vessel that Jones took the honor of hoisting the first U.S. ensign, the Grand Union flag, over a naval vessel. The fleet had been expected to cruise along the coast, but was ordered instead by Commodore Essex Hopkins to sail for the Bahamas, where Nassau had been raided for military supplies. The fleet had an unsuccessful encounter with a British packet ship on their return voyage. Jones was then assigned full command of the USS Providence, which mounted 21 guns. Congress had recently ordered the construction of 13 frigates for the American Navy, one of which was to be commanded by Jones. In exchange for this prestigious command, Jones accepted his commission aboard the smaller Providence. Over the summer of 1776, as commander of the Providence, Jones performed various services for the Continental Navy and Congress. These services included the transport of troops, the movement of supplies, and the escort of convoys. During a later 6-week voyage to Nova Scotia, Jones captured 16 prizes or vessels and inflicted significant damage in the raid on Canseau. Jones's next command came as a result of Commodore Hopkins' orders to liberate hundreds of American prisoners forced to labor in coal mines in Nova Scotia, and also to raid British shipping. On November 1st, 1776, Jones set sail in command of the USS Alfred to carry out this mission. Winter conditions prevented freeing the prisoners, but the mission did result in the capture of Mellish, a vessel carrying a vital supply of winter clothing intended for General John Burgoyne's troops in Canada. The Mellish's captured cargo of 10,000 complete winter uniforms and other equipment were especially appreciated by George Washington and his freezing troops at Valley Forge in the days before they crossed the Delaware River for a surprise attack at Trenton. John Paul Jones continued his patrol of the New England coast until July of 1777, when he took command of the newly built USS Ranger, named in honor of American riflemen. This on the same day that the Stars and Stripes flag was adopted. The Ranger was a specially constructed warship and not a converted merchant vessel. On June 14, 1777, Congress passed two separate resolutions. The first, that the flag of the 13 United States of America be 13 stripes, alternating red and white. That the Union be 13 stars in a blue field, representing a new constellation. The second resolution passed was that Captain John Paul Jones be appointed to command the ship Ranger. Jones was so moved by this that he wrote, "The flag and I are twins, born the same hour from the same womb of destiny. We cannot be parted in life or in death. So long as we can float, we shall float together. If we must sink, we shall go down as one." The European theater. It was in the European area, however, that Jones won lasting acclaim. John Paul Jones sailed for France on November 1st, 1777, with orders to assist the American cause however possible. The American commissioners in France were Benjamin Franklin, Silas Deane, and Arthur Lee, and they listened to Jones's strategic recommendation. In Paris, he found American diplomat Benjamin Franklin sympathetic to his strategic objectives, hit-and-run attacks on the enemy's defenseless places, and the abduction of a prominent person to compel the British government to exchange American seamen rotting in English jails. On the 10th of April, 1778, Jones sailed from Brest, France, in the Ranger with a crew of about 140 men and armed with 18 six-pounders and 6 swivel guns. Heading for the home waters of his youth, he raided Whitehaven off the British coast. On the 27th, 28th of April, he then made an unsuccessful attempt to kidnap the Earl of Selkirk, planning to use him as a hostage to assure the proper treatment of American prisoners. The Earl was away from home, however, and thus escaped capture. Crossing the Irish Sea to Carrickfergus, Jones captured the British sloop Drake in a brilliant one-hour battle, in which Jones lost 8 men and inflicted on the enemy 40 or more casualties. On the 8th of May, he returned to Brest with 7 prizes and numerous prisoners to show for his 28 days at sea. His crews had spread fear and dismay along a considerable portion of the English coast, and it marked the start of his international fame. On the 6th of February, 1778, France signed the Treaty of Alliance with America, formally recognizing the independence of the new American Republic. The French, whose war with England was about to start, hailed Jones as a hero, and the authorities called him to Paris in June for consultation on ways of employing naval forces against England. On the 4th of February, 1779, he was informed that the old East Indiaman Durris, with 40 guns, was placed under his command for joint Army and Navy operations against enemy ports. Marquis de Lafayette was to command the Army element, Jones the naval, but the plans were ultimately abandoned. By the end of the summer, however, the French had outfitted a small fleet of 5 naval vessels and 2 privateers for Jones. Benjamin Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac was very popular in France at the time that Jones was refitting the Durris, and since he was greatly indebted to Franklin for his support, Jones renamed his flagship the Bonhomme Richard, which is the French translation for Franklin's Poor Richard. With the American flag flying over a flotilla financed by France, and with most of the ships commanded by French officers resentful of his authority, Jones put to sea from La Orient on the 14th of August, 1779, sailing clockwise around the British Isles, up the west coast of Ireland, around Scotland, and to the coast of Yorkshire. Jones captured 17 ships and made an unsuccessful attempt to capture the port of Leith and hold it for ransom. On September 23rd, the 41 British ships of the Baltic convoy came into view off the east coast of England. As the merchant ships ran for safety, the two escorting British warships, the 50-gun Serapis and the 20-gun Countess of Scarborough, squared off against the Bonhomme Richard and another American ship, the Pallas. The most spectacular naval battle of the American Revolution followed. A duel between the older Bonhomme Richard and the Serapis, a sturdy, new, copper-bottomed frigate. After each captain, in standard tactical fashion, sought unsuccessfully to get across his opponent's bow to deliver a broadside, Jones managed to lash his ship to the Serapis in order to grapple and board. Jones's sharpshooters soon drove the enemy from the Serapis's deck with their rain of musket and grenade fire. But below the deck, the enemy cannons roared on, wrecking the Bonhomme Richard's topsides. The battle lasted for several hours, leaving the Richard slowly sinking from a raking by the Serapis's 18-pound guns, leading Jones to make his famous pronouncement, "I have not yet begun to fight." Yet ultimately, the victory went to the Americans in part due to the sheer nerve of one of Jones's men, Scotsman Bill Hamilton, crawled across the Richard's main yard with a sack of grenades and tossed it into the Serapis's main hatch, igniting an explosion of powder cartridges. After that devastation, Captain Pearson of the Serapis surrendered. Both crews sustained heavy casualties, and Jones received a head wound. The Bonhomme Richard's crew was transferred to the captured Serapis and the other American ships. Although Jones tried hard to save the Richard, she sank beneath the waves the following day, taking some of Jones's personal belongings with it. In Jones's blasted and ruined luxury cabin, Pearson offered his host his sword, and the two men cordially drank glasses of wine as the poor Richard continued to sink beneath them. In this battle, John Paul Jones's legend of a great naval hero began. John Paul Jones's victory inspired his French allies and the young country that was very much embroiled with land battles. He received many military honors and a special gold medal, which he helped design, that was struck to commemorate the victory. On one Home Richard. Just to pause for a sec, I've actually recently acquired, if anybody can even see my screen right now, if not, I'll show it at the end, a replica of that exact coin with John Paul Jones's
top of the echelon
on the one side, on Home Richard on the following.
Seemingly.
Despite his famous success, John Paul Jones had a difficult time finding a command worthy of his accomplishments.
Some items that want to be.
I apologize, we're getting a little feedback, gentlemen. I'm just going to mute here. You'll bear with me a moment.
Spread the word about what's actually happening to combat the big storm.
I apologize, guys. We're just getting some feedback. Give me 1 second. I'm going to correct this right now, if I can. All right. Well, moving along. Despite his famous successes, oh, sorry, my bad. Sorry. Got a little jammed up. Despite his famous success, John Paul Jones had a difficult time finding a command worthy of his accomplishments. Ben Franklin assured his protege that his honorable conduct and persevering bravery were the talk of Paris and Versailles. Proud as the French were of him, they considered the captured Serapis to be French property, as the Richard had technically belonged to them while Jones captained her. Still, while looking for a position, Jones kept busy. His rock star status, good looks, and gentle manners earned him much appreciation. The French king, Louis XVI, gave him the Order of Military Merit, which allowed him to sign his name, Cavalier Paul Jones, which he sometimes did. Abigail Adams, wife to the future president, wrote of Jones, "Under all this appearance of softness, he is bold, enterprising, ambitious, and active. He has been here often and dined with us several times. He is said to be a man of gallantry and a favorite amongst the French ladies. After being abroad for more than 3 years, Jones reached Philadelphia on the 18th of February, 1781. Senior officers, namely Captain Thomas Reed and James Nicholson, blocked the resolution of Congress to make Jones a rear admiral. But on the 26th of June, Congress gave him command of the largest ship of the Continental Navy, the 76-gun America, which was then under construction at Portsmouth, New Hampshire. After more than a year's frustration in constructing the vessel, Jones saw the America turned over to the French. The best Jones was able to do thereafter was to get permission to sail aboard the flagship of the Marquis Vanderbilt. And he left with the French fleet from Boston for a 4-month cruise in the West Indies. After the Continental Navy was disbanded, Jones got authority to return to Europe as an agent to collect prize money due to the United States as a result of his operations during the war. His mission was successful, although payment was slow. Jones returned to the United States for the last time in the summer of 1787. And on the 16th of October, Congress voted him the only gold medal awarded to an officer in the Continental Navy. Soon afterward, he accepted a commission from Catherine the Great to serve in the Russian Navy and was put in command of a Black Sea squadron with the rank of Rear Admiral. That rank, which he had eagerly but unsuccessfully sought in America, was the bait that had lured him to Russia. He was actually in Russia with America's blessing at the time as well, too. He fought in the Linman campaign against the Turks. On the 29th of May, 1788, he raised his flag on a squadron in the Black Sea. But although he played a key role in naval operations that cleared the way for capture of the Turkish fortress at Ochkov, his position in the Russian service was undermined by a jealous French adventurer, Prince Nassau-Siegen. After he rejected Prince Potemkin's offer of command of the Sevastopol fleet, Jones was forced into idleness and returned to St. Petersburg. There he fell victim to a false, malicious rumor that he had violated a young girl. In September 1789, after receiving the Order of St. Anne, he went to Empress Catherine, hoping to get another command, but instead, he received an official leave of absence. Between his newfound notoriety and the Empress's coldness toward him, it was time to leave Mother Russia and return to Paris. He left St. Petersburg with nothing but bitterness to show for his Russian experience. Death. Unfortunately, the Paris to which John Paul Jones returned was not the glittering jewel it once had been. The French were experiencing their own revolution, and his health was very poor. In 1792, the United States Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, wrote to tell him that President George Washington had appointed him a commissioner to negotiate with Algiers for peace and the release of imprisoned American citizens. Jones never lived to receive the letter. His health steadily declined before his death on July 18, 1792, from dropsy, pneumonia, and a heart condition. He was 45 years old. Jones's French friends paid for the funeral, and he was buried in a lead-lined coffin in the cemetery for Protestant foreigners in Paris, France. They also took care to preserve his body in alcohol so that he might be better paid proper honors when the madness of the world subsided and the United States remembered her hero. It was a long time coming, but some 113 years later, in 1905, under orders from the President of the United States of America and fellow brother Theodore Roosevelt, American authorities located his coffin in the now overbuilt cemetery. They were able to find it relatively easy because it was lined with lead. The body was moved back to America with a lavish show, as 11 battleships saw him back home over the seas with a great ceremony. Fredericksburg was among the places that vied to be his final resting place, but in the end, the Naval Academy Chapel at Annapolis was chosen. The body of John Paul Jones rests in an ornate crypt carved with the names of his fighting vessels. And all the names of his vessels are actually, if you can see the picture good, it's actually wrapped right around the base of the vessel. Pictures can't almost even do this justice. It's such an amazing sight to see. We'll get into that in a couple minutes. John Paul Jones and Freemasonry. John Paul Jones lived a short but very full life. Reading about his life is almost like reading fiction. From his lowly birth, his almost meteoric rise in the American Navy, and his attainment of the rank of Rear Admiral in the Russian Navy. His love of the Masonic craft was second only to his love of liberty and of the United States. He lived his life according to the Masonic principles that he studied. John Paul Jones, Mason, diplomat, seaman, and a man who was admired by his friends and his enemies alike. At the age of 23, John Paul Jones became a member of St. Bernard's Masonic Lodge, number 122, now St. Cuthbert Kilwinning Lodge, number 41, in Kirkcudbright, Scotland, and was raised to Master Mason on November 27, 1770. The actual original copy of his Masonic petition for St. Bernard's Lodge is now kept under lock and key on St. Mary's Isle in the waters of the Solway. The petition reads as follows. To the worshipful, the master, wardens, and permanent brethren of free and accepted Masons of the Lodge of St. Bernard, held at Kirkcudbright, the petition of John Paul, commander of the John, of Kirkendall, humbly show it, that your petitioner, for a considerable time by past, hath entertained a strong and sincere regard for your most noble, honorable, and ancient society of free and accepted Masons, but hitherto not meeting with reasonable opportunity. Do now most humbly crave the benefit of receiving and admitting me into your fraternity as an entered apprentice, promising, assuring, and engaging to you that I shall on all rules and orders of your lodge be most obsequent and observant, that I shall in all things deport, behave, and act answerable to the laws and instructions of the lodge, and in everything to which I may be liable, promising faithful obedience. The compliance of your right worshipful wardens and rest of the brethren will singularly oblige and very much honor, right worshipful, your most humble petitioner and most humble servant, signed, John Paul. This is actually before he had Jones on his name, so then he was actually just John Paul. The early part of the 18th century saw a tremendous spurt in the growth of Freemasonry. The period began a transitional and troubled time. Men instinctively sought to band themselves together, swearing to respect and protect each other in a democratic brotherhood of man. The most conspicuous men on both sides of the Atlantic sought the shelter of Freemasonry. It was surely what was one of the darkest moments of his early career after John Paul killed the mutinous sailor in Tobago and had to flee justice, changing his name to Jones and ending up in America. Masonry drew Captain John Paul Jones back from the very brink of oblivion and set his course toward immortal fame. Landing in Fredericksburg, Virginia, Jones was eager to make the acquaintance of some of the revolutionary leaders. Like many of those powerful men, he was a Mason, welcome at any lodge in the world. George Washington, a well-known Freemason, was a member of Virginia Fredericksburg Lodge, number 4, where Jones lived. John Paul Jones, as we know him, owes much of his appointment as a naval officer to his being a Mason and to the friendship of men who were Masons. In a letter to Benjamin Franklin, Jones said, I can mention a person whom I very much esteem and who has always expressed great obligation to you. I mean Dr. John K. Reed. Dr. Reed was the son of James Reed, brother of Franklin's wife, Deborah Reed, and was quite influential in politics. He was also afterwards Grand Master of Virginia. The three men who backed Jones and saw that he was given an opportunity to prove his valor were Dr. Reed, Benjamin Franklin, and Joseph Hughes, all devout Freemasons. In June of 1777, the Continental Congress ordered John Paul Jones to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to oversee the completion and take command of the newly built USS Ranger. While there, Jones was said to have visited St. John's Lodge number 1 during his stay in Portsmouth. While in Paris, Jones became a member of La Lodge des Neuf Sœurs, or the Lodge of the Nine Sisters, which is a prominent French Masonic lodge of the Grand Orient of France that was influential in organizing French support for the American Revolution. In 1778, the year Voltaire became a member. Benjamin Franklin and John Paul Jones were also accepted, along with Jean Sylvan Bailey. Benjamin Franklin became the master of the lodge in 1779 and was reelected in 1780. Other masters of the lodge included Marquis de La Salle, Charles Dupatet, Eli de Beaumont, and Claude Pastoret. Not good with them French names. After a long and influential stay in Europe, Franklin returned to America to participate in the writing of the Constitution. John Paul Jones, Man of Action by Philip Russell. Excuse me. John Paul Jones, Man of Action by Philip Russell, makes mention of Freemasonry in this quote. In Paris, at this very moment, 1778, Franklin was a luminary at the Lodge of the Nine Sisters, which included among its members Voltaire, Helvetius the philosopher, and Howden the sculptor. At this lodge, Jones was a frequent visitor, and it was here that Howden conceived the idea of making a bust or a statue of Jones, which is deemed to be the best likeness of the captain. The Grand Master of all Masonic lodges in France was the Duke of Chartres, while the Duchess was a leader in the adoptive lodge of women Freemasons affiliated with the Lodge of Candor. Final honors. On Sunday, April 24th, 2016, several hundred Freemasons honored famed naval leader John Paul Jones with a belated memorial service at the Naval Academy Chapel. While it had been 110 years since Jones's remains were brought to Annapolis from France to rest in a crypt under the Academy Chapel, Freemasons learned only within the past year that the Revolutionary War hero had never had a Masonic memorial service from the oldest fraternal organization in the world. As quoted, "We were going through the records and realized the ceremony had never taken place," said Tom Foster, Director of Communications for the Grand Lodge of Maryland. "Any Mason who dies is entitled to a Masonic funeral service. It is the final honor that we can bestow on our departed brother." Better late than never. Between 200 and 300 Freemasons from across the country, wearing tuxedos, aprons, and white gloves, gathered at the Annapolis Lodge and embarked on a procession to the Academy's Dahlgren Hall. The ceremony featured remarks about Jones, his service, and his Freemasonry, as well as the color guard, the hymn, and the playing of the taps. Final thoughts. So what can be said about Brother John Paul Jones? Like any master mariner in the 18th century, John Paul Jones was in the fullest sense the captain of his ship. He ruled by authority, as well as by skill and personality. The rigging, the navigation, the ordnance, and the internal discipline were all his concerns. He was a proud man, slight and wiry, intellectually alert, and as tough with rowdy seamen as he was suave and urbane with Parisian women. John Paul Jones was a Scottish adventurer, an ex-slaver turned pirate in the eyes of the British, who used the American Revolution as an opportunity to get a job. He himself said that "I have drawn my sword in the present generous struggle for the right of men, yet I am not in arms as an American, nor am I in pursuit of riches. I profess myself a citizen of the world." Accepting a commission in the Continental Navy, Jones performed his duties with complete political loyalty to the American cause, despite personal disappointments and lack of opportunity to give his remarkable leadership abilities a full test. 19th century Americans saw him as a self-made man, a brave commander who remained cool when the battle raged, and the greatest naval hero of the American Revolution. At the turn of the 20th century, biographers began to emphasize the plan that Jones proposed for the young Navy, along with his efforts to increase his professional knowledge, both of which are seen are characteristics of the modern professional naval officer corps. A naval hero, captain, a Freemason, a man of the seas and of the world, a legend forged by battle and the birth of a nation. John Paul Jones, as he will live for eternity, the father of the United States Navy. The sea remembers its own. So that is the presentation, gentlemen. I do have another slideshow I'm going to run here in one moment, if you will just bear with me. And I'm just going to run everybody through a little add-on I added to this recently. So as I said, I recently visited with my wife and son. Actually, it was funny because I recently found out I was able to even get on the Naval Academy ground and visit this remarkable place right here that I've done so much reading and talking on. So once I heard that, I kind of just put a quick vacation together, and we were down in Annapolis within like 3 weeks of learning this. So some of the next few pictures are pictures I took in and around the crypt. Now, the crypt rests right in the middle, beautiful, ornate. The pictures honestly can't even do it justice. To be there, especially for me, was such a solemn event. I mean, I recall even having some tears in my eyes, just thinking about all the work I've done in research and now seeing this resting place in person. Around the outside of the crypt, along that outer wall, there was some remarkable artifacts and replicas, which I'm going to show you a couple pictures of as well too. So we'll kind of speed through this slideshow here. Again, really just some really great pictures. Beautiful place to visit. I mean, if you're ever in Annapolis itself, such an awesome place. I mean, Annapolis is beautiful. The restaurants, the food, the Naval Academy, spectacular. As you can see, again, the names of his ships lined at the bottom of his crypt. My son, I love that picture there. That was a great picture. The flags you actually see right here too were some of the flags that John Paul Jones actually flew above his ships. Yes, there is an American flag, but the two other ones were actually some of the original flags that he hoisted, on that ship, on that day when he hoisted the first U.S. ensign on that United States Ranger of Providence. I just forget which one it was. My kid's a Ghostbuster fan, by the way, if you can't tell. So just a dedication here they had to him. Very cool. I loved it. I thought I'd take a picture of that. So this here, this was basically a letter that was written for his appointment to the Navy for one of the flagships. These here were actually some of the awards we talk about, and I'm going to get some close-ups of them in a minute, but one of them's the Order of Military Merit that was presented to him by King Louis in France. The other was the Order of St. Anne, presented by Catherine the Great of Russia. And again, here, a replica of the French Order of Military Merit presented to John Paul Jones. The Russian Order of St. Anne by Catherine the Great presented to him. This here was actually the bust. And I don't even think this is a replica. And it didn't say anything about a replica. So as far as to my knowledge, this is the original bust that when he was attending the Lodge of the Nine Sisters in France was made of him by the sculptor Howden, who was a famous sculptor and made this bust of John Paul Jones, again, said to be in the best likeness of him, which now rests again in the crypt at the Naval Academy. Some pictures that were in the chapel of his return from France with the ceremony being brought back overseas in 1906. This here actually pretty cool. So this is a letter, as you can see on the bottom, signed by President of the Continental Congress, John Hancock. And as you can see up at the top here, and I don't even know if you can see my mouse moving, but up at the top here, you can see John Paul Jones's name. Obviously, this was signed a long time ago, a little faded. But this was basically an order putting him in command of the ship, signed by, as we all know, John Hancock, President of the Continental Congress. Very, very cool documents to see. You didn't even need to go to the Library of Congress or the National Archives. Actually, a better picture of the flags hoisted he had. little redundant, but a couple angles for you. Nice up close shot. Again, very ornate dolphins, fish, waves at the bottom, all beautiful marble. So about a year ago, me and my wife took a trip to Philadelphia. We went to the Museum of the American Revolution. As I was walking around, I didn't really see much naval. They had a naval section, but I didn't really notice any John Paul Jones items. So I went to one of the guys that worked there, and I asked him, "Do you have any, artifacts basically from John Paul Jones?" And he's like, "I have a show for you." So he brought me over to a few cases. Here, right in front of you, the top shelf is actually a telescope used by John Paul Jones on his voyages. And this was a man of the seas. He spent most of his life at sea. So this relic lies right here in Philadelphia. Beautiful, amazing to see. The next one is actually really cool. So this musket you see at the top right there, that rifle, not the bottom ones, not the handguns, the top row musket. This was actually the musket that was given to John Paul Jones when the Battle of the Serapis was won by John Paul Jones. The captain of the Serapis handed over his gun to John Paul Jones as a token. This gun, went to John Paul Jones for his victory over the Serapis. This gun was later gifted directly from John Paul Jones to Benjamin Franklin. So this gun had some amazing history to it. Not sure how the museum got the gun, but again, the gun went from the captain of the Serapis to John Paul Jones and was presented as a gift to Benjamin Franklin, who, if you remember, the ship that he fought, the Bonhomme Richard, was named after. So this was just an amazing sight to see, and the story behind it. I'm sure that kind of resonates all with us being, a lot of Freemasons on this call. We got a couple guys actually on this call tonight from, and I apologize if there's some women too, but we have some people on this call this evening from John Paul Jones's birthplace over in Kirkcudbright in Scotland. The next couple pictures are actually, I believe, from there. So this here, they have a birthplace and a museum over in Scotland. That, as you could probably imagine, I'm dying to get over to. So this is, to this day, some of the stuff. This is a recent picture of the home John Paul Jones grew up in. As you can see here on the left, we have a Scottish flag and an American flag. And again, beautifully kept, remarkable to this day, even over in Scotland, that just the impact this man had in the lives of people around the world. It's unbelievable. And again, all the people on this call. Another cool thing, I took this from their Facebook page. So the birthplace, they literally, this was Saturday, July 9th, and that was this year. This was literally a month ago. They had a birthday celebration in honor of John Paul Jones in Kirkcudbright, Scotland. To this day, 275 years later, I just thought that was totally amazing. It's actually a museum, as I just kind of took a quick snapshot here from their Facebook page, but you can actually go visit the cottage, the museum. Again, here is the if anybody's interested, this is actually their Facebook page, the John Paul Jones Birthplace Museum and Visitor Center. That's where I actually met some of the people on this call and reached out to them. One of the gentlemen actually is from John Paul Jones's Masonic Lodge. They present, and I believe he was telling me, they present the original sash from St. Bernard's Lodge as kind of like honorary presentations. And I believe they told me they present copies of John Paul Jones's original Masonic petition, when doing these presentations. So fantastic, that it's not just me who shares this affinity. just a couple things. So next year, me and my wife are actually planning a trip over to Scotland. It's in the works. And some of the things we're looking to see, as you can see, are all kind of close together. The John Paul Jones Birthplace and Museum in Kirkbean, the John Paul Jones Memorial Statue and Battleground at Whitehaven. Again, you know, when these were the coastlines he sailed up. You know, when we were fighting the British, when we were at war with the British. I believe in Whitehaven, there's actually a statue of him, and some kind of memorial to him in Whitehaven as well too. So he's remembered up and down this coast, not only as a place where he grew up and he was born and he was raised, but you know, a place he came back to and where his roots were, and he fought for, you know, freedom and against tyranny. Again, nice short ride, maybe like a 2-3 hour ride if my GPS was right. Roslyn Chapel, you know, so Glasgow, Edinburgh, beautiful, amazing history over there. So again, I hope I can one day, very soon, make this trip. You know, my wife loves trips, and I like to add a little history and flavor to it. So this is more my end of the trip, while she'll get the scenery and the beach. So we try to compromise. I am going to stop sharing my screen right now and go back to video. And guys, really, thank you all so much. Does anybody have any questions? And I'll do my best to answer.
Good job, Dave.
Thank you. Henry, if I may put you on the spot again. Henry is a brother Mason here, from Kirkcudbright in Scotland. He's the man who presented the John Paul Jones sash. If you wouldn't mind, would you mind saying a couple words?
Yes, well, it was probably a couple of years ago. We were having a clear out. We had to sell our lodge building because there wasn't enough to keep it going. So when we were having a clear out, we found a copy of John Paul Jones's original Petition and a St. Bernard sash that was actually framed. So we reached out to the museum over at Kirkbean, and they were more than happy to take it off our hands, and it's on permanent loan, that if we ever get our own lodge building back, that we would ask for it back so that we could prominent display it. But I noticed there was a wee bit that you missed out, Dave, that he was actually imprisoned in Kirkcudbright as well, at the old toll booth, which Kirkcudbright was a big town in those days, and that building is actually still standing, and it's still got the neck braces where they used to put them round their necks. So if you ever do come over, there's loads of things to see. Kirkcudbright's an old town.
That's awesome. And when I do, I'll be reaching out to you for sure. Don't worry.
I'll certainly sort you out with things. I mean, I've even been to Roslyn Chapel twice.
Wow, nice.
Which is, Roslyn Chapel is just unbelievable place. It's just a magical place. But there's plenty of things to see Masonic wise as well.
Beautiful. Gentlemen, any other questions, any other comments, any other feedback, by all means.
Hey Dave, Scott here. Just really well done. We all enjoyed it here. I think I can speak for all of us here that it was very good, very informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave, something interesting I discovered about the Bonhomme Richard. I looked it up while you're giving your talk. Apparently the spot off of Yorkshire where it went down, apparently there were so many shipwrecks over there that it's still to this day unknown which one is actually the Bonhomme Richard.
Wow, that's, and look, to this day, I literally have a book sitting next to my nightstand I'm still reading. So even after this presentation, I mean, I'm still working on even bettering it and learning more and giving, myself more knowledge. So that's actually great pieces of information too. Thank you very much, Greg.
It's also interesting to find out that it was actually, over on that side of the Atlantic. I think most people assume that all American Revolution battles were fought over here.
Yeah, and hey, well, they were attacking the English coast. So, anybody else?
Dave, I'm also the museum. I'm led to believe that the museum at Kirkbeaton was in short of finances,
Yeah.
and it was one of your American admirals, a retired admiral, that actually helped them out, and it was in the local newspaper about 2 or 3 years ago that he actually come over and got married over at the Kirkbeaton Museum. So you've had an admiral on our side of the pond as well.
That's awesome. I'm actually going to make note of that as well too, and do a little research on that. Yeah, and actually, I've kind of been in touch briefly with a few people from the museum actually as well. I know they shared my presentation on their Facebook page. So very cool, very good support. It's really great. I'm very happy everybody joined. It was my first time really doing something like this virtually, especially branching it out globally to these Masonic groups. So it's really amazing to just kind of see brothers, friends, and people come together from all over the world, just to hear a little bit about a great piece of history. So,
Steve, quick question. Will you make the presentation available for the recording?
I am. I recorded the presentation, so I will be, I'll actually send it out to everybody who's on this email, who registered for the call. I know a lot of people couldn't make it, time differences and, affairs, things they had to, do. So yes, I will be making this available. And I'll upload it to probably my YouTube channel. Everybody pretty much gets YouTube, right? And I'll share it via YouTube link or another link if people don't have YouTube,
Thank you.
Absolutely. Again, gentlemen, thank you so much. Really, it meant a lot to me to do this for you tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and I hope everybody learned something new about this man whose name we all know but probably knew little about. And in my mind, he's a spectacular character, and I'm glad I did it for myself to even learn about it, because it's honestly changed my life knowing about it and learning about it.
Thanks very much. Come visit us in Fredericksburg sometime.
Absolutely, guys. You guys feel free to drop off. I'm gonna hang back for a couple minutes if anybody wants to chat about anything. Other than that, don't feel obligated, and enjoy your night. Everybody have a good evening.
Well, thank you for that, Dave. I'm off to bed because it's the middle of the night. So, and hopefully I'll see you in Scotland soon.
I greatly appreciate you being here tonight, Henry. Thank you so much, man. I'm gonna keep in touch with you on Facebook.
Good night, brother.
Good night, everybody.
Dave, thank you. Amazing presentation. Thanks for your time.
Thank
Thanks for
you
taking
guys
the
for
time.
being here. Thank you for your time. Yep,
To fill us
definitely.
with knowledge about this whole thing. It's amazing. Amazing presentation, and thanks to everyone who actually helped in the research as well.
Yes, Dave, thank you so much. Great presentation. I highly enjoyed it.
Great. Glad to hear it. Thank you guys so much.
Great presentation. I highly enjoyed it.
Great. Glad to hear it. Thank you guys so much.
Good night to all.
Excellent job.
Nestor, I keep seeing your lips moving, but I don't hear anything.
I mean,
I keep seeing your lips moving, but I don't hear anything. Not really. Let me see if I can unmute. Not really.
What about now?
Yeah, now I got you.
Okay, perfect. What I was trying to say is that thank you for your time and to everyone who helped in the research. It's very amazing presentation. Amazing presentation. Thank you very much for your time.
You bet. Thanks for being here, Ness. I'm going to be giving you a call soon, buddy. Thanks for being here, Ness. I'm going to be giving you a call soon, buddy.
Good night,
All right,
everybody.
thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
Bye now.
You know, Dave,
Good night, everybody.
something to think about. The impact
Yeah,
that
good
John
night.
Paul Jones actually had on the
Sorry,
revolution.
I apologize. We're getting so much feedback here. I'm just going to mute a few people temporarily. Go ahead, one person at a time, please. I'm not sure who was speaking. I apologize.
Well, this is Chuck DiRienzo.
Hey, Chuck, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah, good night. Good night.
If you think about the impact that John Paul Jones had on the revolution, as the individual, the fact that he was raiding the British coast caused the British fleet to have to get underway and chase him down, which then allowed the French fleet to set sail and come to the colonies.
Yeah, and I can't imagine there were too many American captains in an almost non-existent navy raiding the British coast, but they were the waters of his home. He knew
Yeah.
them. He knew, you know, the ins and outs. He sailed them for years. So
great presentation, and glad you enjoyed your time in Annapolis. I spent 4 years there a long time ago.
beautiful place, ain't it? Some good clams casino I got there.
Should have had the crabs, man.
And my wife and kid did.
All right, take care, brother.
Chuck, thanks, man. Take care. All right, gentlemen, anybody else? I'm going to disconnect in a moment.
Yeah, Dave, I just had a quick question, but first of all, thank you so much for the presentation. I grew up in Kirkbean and I didn't know near as much as I thought I did. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Awesome,
just
another one from Kirkbean. I love it.
Yeah.
I love to hear that.
I'm actually tuning in from Alberta, Canada. I live here now, but I grew up in the old schoolhouse it's referred to, but it's where John Paul Jones went to school. And
That's
so
wild.
yeah, it was pretty cool. It was a big thing growing up, and then the elementary school in the village had
Yeah.
Paul Jones on their crest and stuff. So it's a big part of the culture down there.
Yeah,
But
and go ahead, sorry.
no, you were going to say something?
No, please finish, and then I'll say what I was going to say.
Well, just my question was, if someone wanted to do their own research and look into things, you mentioned you'd read a few things. What would you recommend? Is there a book that's particularly good, or?
Oh man, you know what? Yeah, there were a few books, and you know what? I didn't even list any of my resources on this one because I just kind of pieced it together from so many different spots. Again, you're talking about a man who was at sea to most of his life, so really a lot of the stuff you're hearing was from his time on land for the most part, you know. Really, I just did a lot of online research. You know,
Cool.
I'm a research guy. Actually, I just ordered a book that came recently. I have a real thick book I bought. I haven't really made it through all of that one. I just picked that one up a few months ago, and then I got another one I just ordered on Amazon. I believe it's just called John Paul Jones. It was
Nice.
like a $10 book, nice short. It's like 50 something pages, you know, right to the point. But you know, honestly, I don't really remember where I grabbed so many of my sources from back then. Some of it was from Masonic Lodge websites, I believe, too. Some of the Freemasonry stuff, maybe even Grand Lodge of Maryland. But yeah, at this point, I could say the internet. But off the top, you know, I will take a look back through all my notes because I have all my sources in a folder on my server. I'll let you take a look, and I'll shoot it. That was Callum.
That's it. Perfect pronunciation. Good job.
Callum. All right. Yeah. Links. I'll send you. I'll see what I got, and I'll send you some links for info.
Appreciate it, Dave. Well, hey, that was fantastic. I really appreciate it. And you gentlemen have a good night.
You too, Callum. Hey, thanks for joining. No, Callum, what I was gonna say is.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, apologize.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, you know, when I started doing this, and I was just throwing it in like random Freemason groups. I don't know who the hell's a member of these groups, you know.
Mhm.
And I had a gentleman reach out to me from Kirkcudbright. I'm like, I
Yeah.
thought it was like the most amazing, and I think it was that guy. I'm pretty sure it was Henry, but I was like, holy shit! Like I'm gonna have
Yeah.
someone from John Paul Jones's birthplace on this
Yeah.
call. I'm like, man, I'm honored. I'm like, that is
pretty
spectacular.
legitimate. Hey, that's
You know
cool.
what I mean? And I'm like, and then I'm like, shit, all my facts better be good.
Oh, I wouldn't know otherwise. But honestly, great job. It's such a cool thing. Again, like I said, I grew up hearing all about John Paul Jones and knew the basics. But it was really cool to hear a little bit more in depth, and then also like I'm not a Freemason, but it was really cool to hear his involvement and how that shaped his life,
Yeah.
and the impact that it's continued to have on the US as a nation, but also
The
Freemasons too. Like you're gonna the world, right? It seems like it's such a sense of pride for everybody, and so it's really cool. So thank you so much for putting all the time into it, and
Absolutely.
preparing.
Thank you for
us. So,
entertaining me tonight and being there.
You did great. Well, anyway, gentlemen, I'm taking off.
Take care, Callum.
Yeah, see you guys. Bye.
I'll shoot you an email. You're gonna get a link with the recording, and I'll send you some links as well.
Perfect. Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
You bet,
Have a good
man.
night.
Take care. Have a good night. All right, Nestor. I'm gonna jump off too, brother. So I can end this recording before I say anything I shouldn't.
Thanks for your time. Amazing. You're amazing,
No,
brother.
Thanks, my man. Hey, I really look forward to seeing you soon. I've been so crazy with work, but I've been meaning to call you and congratulate you. I know you're cleared through the Grand Lodge. I'm gonna be doing your EA degree, so I'm doing your first degree for you. I'm really
Amazing.
looking forward to it. And you think this was amazing? Wait till you see the EA degree.
I'll stay in touch. You have
You
a
bet, my
wonderful
man.
night.
Let's try to get together soon in like the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
hectic for me, but we'll make something work, brother.
Thanks again.
Talk soon, Nestor. Thanks for being here tonight.
All right. Bye now.
Take it easy.